Over the weekend, I decided to crack into the Red Dead that often goes overlooked in the Red Dead franchise. Red Dead Revolver, while not as massively successful as its more handsome, more beef-caked up little brother Red Dead Redemption, it did serve as a proof of concept of the product they would eventually wind up with. It's the scrappy, slightly unhinged older sibling, the one that drinks rot gut whiskey, cheats at poker, and probably smells like gunpowder and bad decisions. Released in 2004, Red Dead Revolver was Rockstar's way to revive a project that had been abandoned by Capcom after Rockstar's acquisition and rebranding of Angel Studios. And let me tell you, Revolver wears that Capcom DNA like a bullet-riddled poncho. This isn't the sprawling, melancholic frontier of redemption. This is a sweaty, grindhouse western with a mean streak. It plays less like a cinematic epic and more like a spaghetti western fever dream where everyone talks like they've been gargling gravel and whiskey and the only law in town is who shot first. The protagonist, Red Harlow, is basically what happens if you strip away all of John Marston's tragic death and leave behind just a simmering rage machine with a six-shooter. He's a walking revenge story, and that's all he really needs to be. The game itself is structured more like an arcade shooter than an open world experience, throwing you into a series of loosely connected gunfights until the story itself starts actually making sense. And that's really the charm of Revolver. It doesn't care about historical accuracy, emotional depth, or even making a whole lot of sense. It just wants to throw weird, over-the-top Western nonsense at you and see how fast you can pull the trigger. It's messy, it's janky, but it's still fun. I'll bet it's sometimes frustrating, but I'll get into that a little later. Let's talk about the mechanics. First off, Red Dead Revolver plays like a game that's not entirely sure if it wants to be a third-person shooter or a light gun arcade game. The movement is stiff, the aiming feels like trying to lasso a rattlesnake with a wet noodle, and the cover system is, well, let's just say it exists in theory. But when you get into a certain rhythm of it, there's a certain charm to its clunky gunplay. Like a rusty old revolver that still fires true if you handle it just right and lube it up in all the right ways and, it starts to not be dog water. The big standout mechanic is Deadeye, which makes its first appearance here in a much simpler form. Instead of the slick, slow-motion targeting system we'd see in Red Dead Redemption, Revolver's Deadeye feels more like you're painting targets on a saloon wall and then unloading the full cylinder. It's janky but satisfying, especially when you get into duels, which turn into these tense, almost rhythm-based shootouts where a split-second hesitation can mean the difference between walking away or taking a forever nap in the dirt. Speaking of shootouts, the game loves throwing waves of enemies at you like it's auditioning for Dynasty Warriors Wild West Edition. Every level is essentially an arena brawl where you take out a revolving door of outlaws, bandits, and circus freaks, with a few boss fights sprinkled in for good measure. And these bosses, they're some of the weirdest, most over-the-top characters you'll ever see in a Western.
You gonna blow up real good, cowboy!
There's a guy who has cleavers, a fire-breathing strongman, and literal freaking undead-looking gunslinger named Mr. Black that has a Gatling gun that he carries in a coffin. But here's where things get a little rough. The difficulty in Revolver doesn't come from smart enemy AI or deep strategy. It comes from the game's stubborn refusal to meet you halfway. The controls are stiff, the hit detection can be spotty, and some levels feel like it was designed by someone who hates the concept of quality assurance. One minute you're gunning down outlaws with ease, and the next you're getting obliterated by cannon fire that keeps you propelled in 6 feet in the air before you can even land. And yet, despite all that, it's still fun in that gritty PS2 era jank kind of way. It's rough around the edges, sure, but there's something endearing about a game that throws everything at you with zero concern for balance or polish. But let's get into the real heart of the game. Its personality. If Red Dead Redemption is a moody, contemplative Western novel, then Red Dead Revolver is a pulpy, dog-eared comic you found at a gas station or a thrift store. It's loud, brash, and completely uninterested in subtlety, which is exactly why it's so fun. Every character feels like they walk straight out of a Sergio Leone film after spending a little much time at the saloon and getting high on bath salts. Red Harlow, with his grizzled one-liners and permanent scowl, is the perfect embodiment of a 1970s revenge flick protagonist. But the real personality of Revolver comes from its rogue gallery of lunatics. Take General Diego, for instance. The guy looks like every corrupt warlord stereotype cranked up to 11, lounging around in his fortress while sending an army of goons to do his dirty work. Or Pig Josh, the dynamite-loving maniac who charges at you with explosives and metal strapped to his chest like he just lost a bet with the devil and he joined the Taliban. And then there's Jack Swift. He's a ridiculously smooth-talking British gunslinger, and he wields dual revolvers, and he's not one of the rogues gallery, but like each character is pretty much a caricature of someone from a Wild West film. It's completely over the top and ridiculous, and I love that for it. The whole game is packed with these over-the-top characters, each one more absurd than the last. Even minor enemies feel like they were designed by someone who had way too much fun sketching ridiculous outlaws on the back of a high school notebook. There's no pretense of realism, just a world where everyone is a walking caricature. And honestly, that is the appeal. Visually, Revolver leans hard into that exaggerating Western aesthetic. Everything's baked in sepia tones. The environments look like dusty, sun-bleached sets straight out of an old spaghetti western, and the character designs, they're wildly inconsistent in the best way possible. Some look like classic cowboy movie extras, while others look like they belong in Mad Max. And the sound design, oh man, the soundtrack is perfect. The Rockstar didn't just slap together generic cowboy music. They went all in with having twangy guitars, dramatic horns, and that signature whistle that makes you want to squint into the sun like you're Clint Eastwood on a really sunny day. Like it's high noon and you're just looking at the sun and you just got to squint. But personality alone doesn't make a game great. So the big question remains, does Red Dead Revolver hold up? Well, that's a little complicated to answer. Honestly, yes, but only if you understand what you're getting into. If you're expecting Red Dead Redemption, you'll be disappointed. Revolver isn't about realism, open world exploration, or deep character drama. It's a pulpy, linear, arcade-style shooter that wears its influences on its sleeve. If you can appreciate that, there's a lot of fun to be had. It's an artifact from a time where Rockstar was experimenting with the Red Dead franchise, and while it's rough around the edges, it's got a unique energy the Redemption, for all its polish, sometimes lacks. Final verdict, it's not perfect, but it is a damn good time. Fortunately for you, if you want a refresher for the story, the next section of this video is going to cover that, but before I do, of course, I want to give a big spoiler warning here. If you want to avoid that, go play and come back for my thoughts and to share your own, but be sure to hit that subscribe button before you do. I don't want to turn to train robbery for a proper living. I'd much rather make goofy YouTube videos, and hitting that subscribe button helps the channel grow. So, without further ado, let's get into the story. The story follows Red... I'm not going to do it like that. The story follows Red Harlow, a bounty hunter on a quest for revenge after witnessing the brutal murder of his parents as a child. Years before the game begins, Red's father, Nate Harlow, and his business partner, they discover a gold mine in Bear Mountain. To celebrate, they forge 2 custom revolvers. And actually, let me make a quick correction on what I said. They don't discover a gold mine. They discover gold, which will eventually be turned into a mine. But they pretty much, stake their claim in it, and they had dual claim, with Red's father holding half and his partner holding the other. But to celebrate it, they forged these 2 custom revolvers, and eventually Griff gets captured by the Mexican army and betrays Red's father to save himself, revealing the gold's location to General Diego. Diego, who didn't want to deal with the competition for the gold, orders one of his goons, one of his lackeys, to eliminate Nate and his family. One night, as Red's father is coming home, Nate explains to him, "Yo, son, we're gonna be rich. I've done struck gold. Here's you a gun. I got my own gun. I'm gonna go throw it down to your mama." And this is abruptly ended because, unfortunately, one of the general's colonels has started to raid the family farm. Young Red tries to fight back, and he grabs his father's burning revolver, and while his father and mother falls in the battle, he grabs this burning revolver, which scars up his hand, and he hits General Diego's colonel in the shoulder, and they escape. And Red as he escapes, we don't see him again. We get a time skip at this point, and we now see Red Harlow as a fully fledged bounty hunter. After claiming a few bodies, he carts them to a town for payment, only for the town to be overrun with bandits. And after saving the sheriff, you hop onto a train heading to the town hub of the game that you can kind of go in between levels, visit the shops, and talk to the different characters. You go to Brimstone. And while in Brimstone, there is talk of an upcoming showdown sponsored by the governor and a huge prize, but we pass time completing random bounties with various nefarious folk. During this time, we meet other protagonists like Jack and Annie before finding out about the gold mine on Bear Mountain, which our father had half the claim to, and a one-armed man. One bar brawl later, and we set out to find this man and get our redemption. See, you see what I did? We're getting our redemption, our Red Dead redemption, but this isn't that game. This is the Revolver game. That was just a little inside joke if you didn't know. A little inside joke for the Red Dead series for fans who like that type of thing. We then get a little bit of insight into General Diego. And this is by far the most frustrating mission. I believe it was chapter 14. It was called Traitors. And that is the bane of my existence. And it almost made me stop playing the game. I am a little embarrassed to admit that the playtime for this level, but it starts with 3 and ends up with wondering if I need to call my brother and handle this mission with remote play. It would have been fine with checkpoints, but the clunky mechanics partnered with the cannon firing soldiers who die if they get sneezed on, it wasn't the Elden Ring type of hard that you can overcome, but it's more so the who the hell play tested this level and said, yeah, that'll do, they can wing it. It was broken and frustrating to say the least, but you do get the joy of a goofy-ass General Diego making the deal to cut the Harlow family out from the gold mine. Past this point, you set out on a quest to deal with General Diego's goons and the one-armed man that killed your father. You partner up with Buffalo Soldier and your Native American cousin and go after General Diego. Wrapping up the Wild West war on crime that you fought after a steep battle with Diego's colonel and then surprisingly super easy battle with General Diego, you go back to Brimstone, and this is the part where you enter the showdown, right? And you're gonna enter the governor sponsored showdown, At this point, though, we have already seen that the governor is corrupt. He's in cahoots with General Diego. So General Diego was just a symptom of a overlying problem, and that was the governor himself. The governor essentially takes control of the showdown from the sheriff, and then he tries to put the dead in Red Dead. He kicks out Annie and Jack from the competition and says you're disqualified, and then puts you up against this random Joe Schmo who's doing all the governor's dirty work, and says, all right, this'll be the winner of the showdown, and get to work, start killing each other, assuming that the reigning champion would be able to dispatch you with ease. Well, if you got the gaming skills like I do, you survive by the hair of your little chinny chin, and well, you got work to do. You get to fight. You actually get to fight around the town of Brimstone, and this was actual fun level. The only problems with it is that you could hit civilians, and if you hit a civilian in this game, it would instantly fail the mission, and you'd have to restart. And it did suck to have to restart and do that whole dead eye or the draw mechanic. After winning this battle, you are now set to take on the governor. You partner up with your previous allies, Annie and Jack Swift, and you launch an assault on the governor's mansion. At this point, it's pretty much a wrap on the game. The last level is fine and all. It's fun, but there is it felt kind of underwhelming, considering all the goofy types of the rogues gallery that you've dealt with before. This final mission is pretty much cowboy in tone, and there's nothing particularly special about it aside from just being frustrating at some of the points. And but you do get the satisfaction of having a final duel with the governor and wiping that shit-eating grin off of his face, and making him realize that Red Harlow isn't one to be messed with. And you've done it. Credits roll, and you're now ready to play Red Dead Redemption a few years later on PS3. You're done with Red Dead on the PS2. Good job. And that's pretty much the story. There is a showdown local multiplayer mode though, that as you go through the story, you can unlock journal entries, and you can unlock different levels. You can unlock different characters to play as, and that's one of the cooler aspects of the game. But that's it. That's the story. And here's the kicker: it's actually not part of the Red Dead Redemption series as canon lore. Red Dead Revolver pretty much exists as folk tales, and Red Dead Redemption just stories that get passed along the Western Front. And that you played that story and you're done. That's great. You played a fairy tale, Brothers Grimm style, but that's okay. It was fun, and I did enjoy it, but just know it's not going to be like Red Dead Redemption if you're looking for a game that's like Red Dead Redemption. But overall, I would say that I really enjoyed this blast from the past. As you'll hear me talk about with a lot of these games, I played this back in the day with my brother, and I'm just so thankful that he got me cultured at an early age so that I was able to fully appreciate Red Dead Redemption when its time came. I'd like to say to offer my thanks and appreciation for watching this video. If you'd like to support me directly, you can just hit that subscribe button, really. Leave a like, maybe tell me what you think about Red Dead Redemption series, Red Dead Revolver in particular, or whatever games that you'd like to see me do next. I'm so appreciative that you took the time to watch this video, and hopefully I'll see you in the comments, and I'll see you next time.
There's anything I can't stand. It's a varmint what don't know its own business.